When Division 2 initially launched, it regained a ton of players who jumped in and started to learn the ins and outs. I was one of those players, lapsed after jumping into the sequel at launch. I was excited for this reset point of the series. Now that we're some time in, I do think that there are a lot of positive aspects brought with Warlords of New York that have really done tremendous things for the game. However, a lot also had to be changed, and that resulted in several problems that have come up with the exploits, NPC damage, and lack of build diversity. In this video, I don't just want to go over your regular categories and talk about every little facet of the game. Instead, I want to try a different approach when bringing up my take on the current state of Division 2 by going over what I see as the biggest strengths of the game and the biggest weaknesses in my review. Alright, here's my YouTube plug. Subscribe, like, and hit that bell, then sit back because you won't want to miss what I have to tell. Recalibration. Let's get things started off on the right foot by talking about the positive aspects of where the game is at today. Easily one of the biggest improvements to the series was the recalibration table. Not only did this give you a methodology for crafting your most coveted pieces of gear, but it also acts as a checklist of collectibles in the form of statistics that have a direct impact on what you're able to do with your builds in the game. Getting a piece of gear with one good statistic is no longer considered a bad thing. You can bring one of the build slots up to a level that would make it usable, or drop it on your bench for future use on a separate item. I honestly love this more than I ever expected. You don't realize how powerful it is until you're pretty far into the game and working to min-max every single little stat you get on a drop. Similar mechanics have been used in other games, but Division was the first looter shooter to incorporate something so powerful, and I'd love to see more games improve upon this idea. To be honest, I'm surprised that this type of stat collection system hasn't simply become a staple of the games we love. It's seriously that good, and more games need to adapt it, period. Loot progression. I alluded to this in the recalibration section, but having a recalibration table also bolstered the possibilities when looking at how you build your perfect killing machine. I never claimed to know everything about Division 2, and the deeper I go into the build options, the more I find that there are so many choices when it comes to team composition and builds you can craft to deal with NPCs. Of course, you can always dive into a DPS build, but there are crowd control options, healer options, and skill build options at your disposal. Build diversity could be greater, but because of the loot progression system that's facilitated by the recalibration table, you always feel like you're making progress towards your perfect concoction of armor, weapons, and skills that will perfect what you've been working on. Exotics. Exotics do an excellent job of tying it all together. Drop rates notwithstanding, when you do acquire a new exotic piece of gear, it opens up new ways you can compile each item you're wearing. Acosta's Go Bag is great for a skill build and will allow you to easily hop into overcharge with a grenade toss so you can do even more damage. The coveted LMG Bullet King allows you to fire forever and pairs incredibly well with a DPS build focused on simply doing sustained damage and bolstering your other DPS build teammates with more ammunition on a regular basis. The Tardigrade is an excellent pairing for an overall armor-based build. While all the exotics do not land perfectly, these additions have been coveted items players seek to enhance their unique playstyles. The drop rates could be a tad better though. The story. Overall, the story with Warlords of New York kept you interested and did a great job of introducing several new villains with interesting backgrounds and locations to infiltrate. They continue the story after the main narrative in the form of manhunts, and I like that a lot too. I like that it quickly took us through the campaign and developed out the villain a tad more, as well as their motivations. I hope Massive continues this trend as we learn more about the fallout from the campaign. The Battle Pass. Simply because of the fact that the Battle Pass items are available for free and can be acquired via the targeted loot sections of the game, I'm going to give it the thumbs up. Not only has the pass introduced new, unique weapons and armor sets into the sandbox, but it also gave Massive a model for a plethora of events and activities, be it the manhunt that you can tackle for big XP gains, or the regular events that pop up like the Urban Jungle Apparel event, Polarity Switch, or the leagues. Each has offered yet another activity to pursue, and each has rewarded with a plethora of goodies. Those goodies are of course in addition to any XP or world drops you'll possibly be acquiring as you farm them. This has worked out much better than I ever could have expected, and I hope they continue to build upon this model with the next season pass. Okay, now that we've gone over the good, let's go over the parts that I don't think have been as great. Build diversity. While I talked a lot about loot progression, recalibration, and building our enemy killing machine, build diversity, especially in the armor department, has been lackluster. With the change Warlords brought in, Massive has constantly been fighting against overpowered NPCs and received damage, making it for a rough go of things if you don't have DPS in mind. Currently, things are still heavily weighted towards your ability to do DPS, especially in solo play. Even with a massive amount of armor, you'll still get melted by most NPCs who can blind fire your health to smithereens even if you poke out only for a moment. The other problem, especially with blue builds, is that you have to sacrifice your damage output in order to make a blue set that should make you a tank. Instead, this results in you not really being able to output any damage, not being able to take that much damage, and therefore not being a viable solo play build or even team comp build. The only way you can make a blue build viable in the current sandbox is to use a shield paired with a passive support item that enhances your teammates' defense. Damage to Elite's an item that bolstered builds pre-Warlords was removed, but it was never replaced with something comparable that gave us an edge. With the mismatch of overpowered NPCs and lackluster armor builds, Massive still has their work cut out for them to balance it all out. Damage. The damage output of NPCs, especially characters like the Cleaners and some True Sons abilities, have been insanely overpowered since the launch of Warlords of New York. One game on solo heroic difficulty, regardless of your build style, will make it very apparent that these characters need to be tweaked, so it has been extra frustrating to see that Massive recognize the need for tweaks to co-op scaling so late into the launch of Warlords. The expansion was supposed to be a reset point for the series, and it has instead created several instances of imbalance that were readily apparent in the mainline story missions that the player base noticed immediately but somehow Massive missed on initial launch. It was to the detriment of what could have been a celebratory launch, and that's just disappointing. Exploits. The turret exploits, Shade Watch leveling, or getting bosses to reappear so you can farm for exotics. There have been several exploits discovered in Division 2 that have been to the detriment of player sentiment and overall opinion of the game. No matter what side you were on in the huge ban and rollback that took place in Division 2, the fact remains that it all gives the impression that there are problems with the game that Massive could have handled better. I've talked about this a lot, and you can see the video where I go over exploits in detail. To recap, I do feel like Massive should have taken a bit more time to QA these items, especially seeing the boss farm strategy has been around since the original Division. I much prefer the stance Bungie has taken in these situations. If you're a hacker, you're banned forever. If you're killing enemies too fast because Bungie did something wrong, then that's on them. The Dark Zone. Originally a fun location to go hop into because of the higher chance of getting a god roll, the Dark Zone started off as a promising look into what Division 2 could offer players. Fast forward to today, and you're either running into players teaming or not running into anyone at all. In its current state, there are also very few reasons to hop into the space to farm, and there's not really a sense of fear if you decide to dive in. Get a bad instance filled with griefers? Just leave and try a different location or world instance. I'd love to see Massive put some TLC into this space that encourages different playstyles, because in the Dark Zone's current state, it just feels like wasted potential. Exotic drop rates. I realize that exotics are supposed to be coveted pieces of gear that you hope to acquire, but in my experience, it has taken no less than 40 plus attempts to get even a single miserable version of an exotic weapon or piece of armor to drop. Thank you. I've been trying to get this fucking exotic for a month. When the only way to acquire some of these exotics is to run the same mission over and over again until you can recite the lines the characters say by heart, you've run it too much. I'm not sure how to correct this issue, but thankfully with Title Update 9, they're taking some much needed steps toward improving the quality of rolls that drop and allowing recalibration should you get a version of said weapon that isn't quite up to snuff. Hopefully, they'll also look at the frequency they drop and increase rewards a tad for doing things like playing on a higher difficulty or turning on modifiers. Now, if they were to make the chance increase each time you ran a mission or objective that rewards an exotic, that would go a long way to softening the slogfest that you currently face. So those are my main points of success and main points of challenge I'm seeing in Division 2. I recognize that these are my opinions and you may have an alternate take, so let's talk about it in the comments section. Do you see other ways the game could improve, or do you have any areas that you're loving? Let's talk about it more. All things considered, I'm still hooked on Division 2. Yes, even with everything that's gone on, and I can't wait to see how Massive continues improving this game for all of us. Until next time, this is Destin signing off. Subscribe, like, hit that bell, and I'll see you next time.